Wait a minute, so you say you're tired of hearing me talk? Well, today is your lucky day because we're going to wrap up advanced workflows and send it to the archives. Archiving is a thankless task for video editors that many overlook or at least don't really understand. If you take away one thing from part 12, it's this. Hard drives are not archives. I don't care if you have 2 identical drives or 96 identical drives, it still doesn't count. Now, for the more nuanced information, here are some of the best practices for future-proofing. Before sending your projects to bed, it's a good idea to create texted and textless versions of the videos with split DME audio in a quality intra-frame codec like, you guessed it, ProRes or DNx HD. Now, this is a good idea because let's say a client comes back 3 months or even 2 years from now and wants to make a few revisions to a delivered project. Depending on the ask, you can restore the entire multi-terabyte project, or you can restore some final texted and textless exports, update them, and give the client what they need. Also, having these exports on hand makes it easy to incorporate them into demo reels, but that's a whole separate topic. Anyways, back to archiving. Done right, archiving can be a heavy burden because it takes up a ton of storage space. Storage space requires hardware, and hardware costs money. So based on the scale of your operation and the scale of your projects, you should determine what's the best archiving method for you. Let's take a look at a few of the archiving methods. This is a beefy slide, so sorry, not sorry. Archiving methods include archiving the whole project, media managed projects, or just the delivered project. Archiving the whole project is the best method because it keeps absolutely everything. But what's the problem with that? Well, everything takes a lot of space. A good compromise is to archive a media managed project. And depending on your settings, a media managed project will simply weed out files that aren't used in a project, keeping only the media you need, or even trim the source files down to only the sections that are used in the edits, saving even more space. The downside here is that you lose the unused media, which might be useful in the future, and you also lose the project's folder structure. The last archiving method would only be to back up the delivered project. This would include final exports and the project file. Even without media, the project file can be useful in the future if you need to find a clip in a final export. The plus side to this method is it requires the least amount of storage space. The negatives are huge though. Few options exist for revisiting or reworking footage if the revisions are requested in the future. So now we know some archive methods, but where do we put all of these projects when we're done with them? First, let's define what a true archive really is. An archive is 2 complete backups of a project that are stored in 2 geographically separate locations. Why? Well, imagine if the original Star Wars films were archived in one warehouse in Burbank, California, and a giant earthquake strikes, and that warehouse is swallowed into the earth. Well, the story of Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader is officially gone. But if there's another copy of the film saved in a different warehouse in Bakersfield, California, then all's going to be right in the world, except for the whole massive earthquake thing hitting Los Angeles. But let's move on. So if you're interested in offsite storage for your workflow, just Google offsite media storage for your area. Anyway, thinking about this, you can again see where true archiving has a heavy overhead. So geographic locations aside, what kind of hardware do you use? Well, let's start with hard drives. The first and the worst option. Remember what I said at the start of this video? They don't count. Hard drives fail, and spinning hard drives that are stacked on a shelf collecting dust are even more prone to failure because they can seize up from not being used. They literally stop spinning. If a hard drive is your only option for a backup, do yourself a favor and have at least 2 copies, if not more. The next option is to use a dedicated RAID for archiving in RAID 5 or better yet, RAID 6. This is still relying on hard drives, so it's not a true archive, but thanks to the RAID's redundancy, it's a better option than hard drives alone. One benefit to sending finished projects to a RAID is that they're quick to access if they're needed in the future. I personally use a RAID 6 as a time machine backup for my desktop as well as a soft archive for any of my recently delivered projects. But when I'm ready to go into cold storage, I move to LTO, Linear Tape Open. Yes, tapes. If you thought tapes were dead, you were dead wrong. LTO is the industry standard for archiving digital media. A single tape can have a 30+ year lifespan. The downside to LTO is the hardware is expensive. A single drive still costs a few $1,000s, and the read and write process is very slow compared to a traditional hard drive, though speeds are continuing to improve. LTOs can be found as single drives or even large, massive tape libraries that house petabytes of information. If you're interested in going the LTO route for archiving, make sure that the software you use to put your data onto tapes uses an open source architecture to write. This is important because there are companies on the market with proprietary software that lock you into their system. So if that company disappears and you need their software to restore something, you're out of luck. And as for a friendly, easy to use software option for single tape decks, you can look into Hedge Canister. It's basically a drag and drop archiving solution that writes using an open source LTFS format. But what about the cloud? We've made it out of the 1980s and the internet is still a thing, so I'm sure you're wondering about that. Well, all I'm going to say is you're not wrong. Logistics is what currently keeps archiving to the cloud from being a go-to option. For most people and for companies, it's hard to transfer terabytes of data across the internet, but that time is coming. If you're interested in a service to store final exports, project files, etc., you might want to check out these resources. There are links in the Part 12 PDF. All right, I think that's it. Say what? That was the end of the course. I know that was a ton of information, but I hope through everything that you were able to learn something that you're going to be able to use to propel your career forward. And more than that, I hope that after everything that I've talked about, that you now have the knowledge to become a more confident technical editor. Now, there is one more thing that I need to ask, and that's if you hated this course or if you love this course, I need to know. This is my first time going down this road, and the only way that I can get better is if you tell me what I can do to improve. So please help me out, drop me a line, let me know what you thought about everything that I went through, and maybe I can use it to make things better for some other people, and maybe even yourself. So until then, good luck and happy editing.